Let's jump in then and get started, shall we? Today's speakers. My name is Greg Newman. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Zadara. There's me on the left. And I'm joined today by two experts. I'm very pleased to have Noam Shendar, our VP and General Manager of Cloud Business, and Scott Miller, Director of Business Development at LucidLink, a partner of ours. And he's going to be sharing with us some stories about how specifically LucidLink and Zadara really make for a very nice future-oriented implementation of what you might call smarter storage. And we'll dive into that as we get going. So those are today's speakers. Let's jump right in and talk, shall we? Of course, we promised you we're going to talk about supercharging AWS. Let's start by looking at what AWS actually offers. As you can see here, all of you who do use AWS, and by a show of hands, please tell me who does. Okay, very good. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that joke. The 8 different services you see here may be very familiar to you. Some of these are very popular, some are less popular, but what AWS has done has put together a very capable stable of options. And I think we all know that they do a fine job at what they do. But we also know, those of us that use AWS, know that there are, in fact, limitations. And those limitations are baked into some of the limitations that were present in the cloud maybe years ago. And maybe they're limitations of the service and the way AWS likes to do business. We don't like limitations here at Zadara, and I know that our friends at LucidLink don't like them either. And so we've explored ways to do that. And since 2011, we have here at Zadara come up with some terrific ways to do that. We're going to talk about it, but let me bring in my experts now to talk a little bit in more specific details about some of those limitations at AWS and some of the limitations with respect to the kinds of storage that you're probably using. Here we have, for instance, object storage. Scott, why don't you, I know this is a slide we talked about yesterday, and LucidLink, of course, does some work. Jump in and talk to us a little bit about what you've seen at LucidLink in terms of the limitations with respect to object storage.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that, and really excited to be here and partnered with a great company like Zadara that's doing really forward-thinking stuff in the area of storage. And when you think about object storage and the services that we just looked at from Amazon, who pioneered this back in the day, it's been about 10 years, I guess now. You look at object storage and you say, you know, it's elastic, it's durable, it's cost-effective. So why can't it be used everywhere? And about 4 years ago, LucidLink basically came up with the idea that we were going to create a distributed file service natively built in the cloud to handle the latency and accessing files over distance. And so rather than just using it for backup or archives, we've created a system that allows you to access it from any location, any system, and users and applications can access it as if it's local disk. And so we'll get into some more of the details later there, but that's essentially what we're doing.
And I'm glad you said it the way you did, because this is the theme here for today, and that is the features and the flexibility that you're looking for through the cloud and through AWS in particular are not always there. That was object storage, and Scott, your comments on that are pertinent. And then I'm gonna move us to the next slide where we're talking about EFS, and this is really our bread and butter here at Zadara. Noam, I'd like to bring you in because you know full well, as the GM, General Manager of our cloud business, exactly where EFS is in fact great. We know that, but they're limited. Talk to us about what you hear from our customers and from users about EFS and what they're looking for that maybe isn't there.
Absolutely. to continue where Scott was headed, the state of affairs before EFS was that only object storage and block storage were available through AWS, and that was a huge gap because, as we all know, in the enterprise, most of the data is file. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 80%, according to both Gartner and IDC, is what they call unstructured data, which is in enterprise largely file-based. AWS added EFS in order to address that gap, and that's a great thing. And EFS is a great service where enterprise users tend to run into limitations is what we see here on the slide. So an obvious example is Windows support. So Windows is a dominant operating system out there in the enterprise, and EFS neither supports SMB-CIFS protocol, which is the native protocol for Windows environments, nor Active Directory, which is the native user access management for Windows environments as well. Other things that EFS runs into are things like noisy neighbor when it comes to shared resources, and then enterprise features, the things that we take for granted on-prem and which we would rather not lose when we go into the cloud. For example, snapshots and clones, and remote replication, quotas. Probably everybody here has ever dealt with file storage in a traditional enterprise environment, has put quotas together to keep usage under control. And specific to the cloud, multiple VPCs. Almost every user out there, and certainly every sophisticated use case, requires multiple VPCs, and one would rather share storage among those multiple VPCs rather than silo everything. And these are the sophisticated use cases where EFS doesn't quite meet the needs.
Yep. And it's interesting how some people I know you've talked to have said, wow, this is possible. It's almost as if the question has not yet been raised in many people's minds. And so when we look at how we like to frame it, we talk in very simple terms. What's our mission? What are we trying to do? We're trying to bring the power of enterprise data storage to the cloud and bring you a combination, if you will, of everything you expect in your data center with the convenience of AWS. And we're going to look in just a few minutes in a little bit more detail about how we do that. But that is exactly what we're attempting to achieve. And in fact, as you've heard from Scott and from Noam, we've been doing it now for years and with many, many customers. When you think about, therefore, combining the convenience of the cloud with the power of the enterprise data center, we'd like you to think about Zadara. And there you go, pointing right to it. Who are we? Let's tell you a little bit. Stop for a little commercial message here. Let me tell you a little about who we are. We are an advanced technology partner. We have the competencies you can see here on the screen, a storage competency and a media competency, public sector competency, interesting. And we are, in fact, a marketplace seller. And we're going to look at that on another slide because that really helps with the convenience and the integration between our solutions and systems and the systems that you're already using at AWS. Okay, so you're probably asking yourself, okay, this is good. I understand conceptually what you're saying. What is it exactly you do? How does this work? We've put together this slide here to give you as clean and clear a description as possible what it is we do. Noam, I know you began talking about this. We do offer different data types. You mentioned the different some of the protocols there, and then we didn't get a chance to talk yet about the location. I think maybe it would be a good idea to really explain to people just what the breadth, if you will, and the depth of the Zadara solution is.
Happily, in keying off of what you said earlier about our mission here at Zadara, our mission at Zadara is to get you away from compromises. And I mean that in at least two ways. One is, if you want to move to the cloud, why not have all the capabilities that you had before in the cloud? Why choose between convenient and fully featured? And on-prem, there's another compromise that tends to be made, which is the trade-off between staying on-prem and having flexibility. So our mission is to bring the flexibility to the on-prem environment and to bring the capability to the cloud environment, meaning that at both ends of this spectrum, you, the customer, have full flexibility and full featuredness. So what that means so talking about locations, as Greg mentioned, not only do we do all of these great things at AWS, but we also do that on premises. And when we do that on premises, it's the same cloud business model, meaning purely on demand, pure OpEx, as a service, strong SLA, pay only for what you use, not for what you have.
Yep. And just, I know a lot of people scratch their heads and they say, well, so when I do an on-prem solution with you, am I basically connecting to your cloud? And of course, the answer is no. Literally, we bring equipment into your facility and we manage it for you. And this is an important distinction because it means you get all of the benefits of on-prem. This is totally dedicated, and we're going to show in a little bit more detail about how that works. But before we do, Scott, I want to rope you back in here because we've got on this list and the list of protocols a custom protocol, and some people who are on this webinar might be asking themselves, what do you mean by custom? And when we work with a leading edge partner like you, and we have the platform that we have that's so mature and well developed, we can actually accommodate and make room for these types of future-oriented solutions. So talk a little bit about the custom. Why did we put that in there? We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, that's a good point, Greg. So when you're dealing with NFS, CIFS, SMB, the standard protocols out there, they're designed to be used for LANs, right? So when you use them in a WAN situation, they start to break down. It's perfectly fine when you're using local disk, but when you start to use, say, local applications, over distance and latency kicks in, then the chattiness of those protocols causes a very large degradation in performance. So at LucidLink, what we've done is we've built our solution from the ground up natively in the cloud with proprietary protocols. So we separate out the metadata and synchronize that separately from the file data that we save in the object storage. And so by doing that, we solve that problem of latency and distance and allow you to literally access those files from any location, any device, whether it's in remote offices or whether it's from home or wherever you happen to be. And you don't have the problem with having to download the files, wait for them to download before you can access them, make changes, and then have to upload them and wait for them to upload before somebody else can access them.
This is good stuff, and it speaks to what I know is near and dear to our hearts, and I'm sure the people attending and listening here today would agree that we're in early days of this giant migration to the cloud and a different way of thinking about our data and a different way of thinking about how to access that data. And when you look at companies like Zadara and LucidLink and you see how we're pushing those boundaries and doing it in a way that's proven and solid, you realize there's a pretty bright future out there. It's exciting, but it does require us to ask some new questions and to be thinking differently about, as compared to the traditional methods, right, of data storage and management. Requires us to think a little bit differently. So let's take a look at, in more specifics, what it is we actually do. Those of you who manage data centers for a living, I think will find this slide particularly useful. Noam, will you walk us through this, please?
Of course. What you're looking at is the architecture of what we call the virtual private storage array, and sometimes we call it VPSA for short. And this, again, to reiterate the previous point, this is available both connected to AWS and other public clouds, and it's also available with private hardware on the customer's own premises, or both. There's a hybrid model as well. So in both cases, it's the identical hardware, the identical software, the identical business model. And what you see here is a simplified example with two tenants. Those two tenants could be two different customers, or it could be one company with multiple departments or multiple applications for that matter. If we look at the first user, tenant, department application, it's in green, and so that's the VPSA A, and the green is using up 4 drives, which we see along the top of the diagram, horizontally across 4 what we call nodes. Just think of them as physical enclosures, and these drives are managed by dual controllers, which are also spread across multiple nodes. In this case, two nodes. That's customer or application 1. Customer application 2 is in blue, using a set of 8 drives. These are the 8 drives in gray, in 2 groups of 4, and they are separate dual controllers for this blue customer. And there are 2 lessons I'd like you to take away from this picture. Number 1 is these 2 tenants are entirely isolated from each other. They share nothing. They don't share drives, they don't share memory, they don't share CPU cores, they don't share a network space, nothing. It's as if they are in parallel universes. And that's really important because it means that if we're talking about a multi-tenant environment, there's no noisy neighbor effect because there's nothing that green can do to slow down blue and nothing that blue can do to slow down green. If it's a single tenant environment, let's say a single company with multiple applications, same story. Imagine that you have a number of applications running and you want to add one more. Well, if you use a new VPSA for the new application, you know a priori that application will not slow down anything that's already running, which is an amazing guarantee. The new thing will not screw up the old thing. And it's not utopia; it's reality. This is how this works today, and has for years now. The second thing to take away from this, it's really cool, and it's one of those things. Well, why didn't I always have this? Why, or where have you been all my life? Type situation. The second thing to note about this is the resilience. Take away any of these nodes here and nothing bad happens. Even the most important node, which is the leftmost node, which has 3 active drives and the 2 active controllers, there are automatic failovers to the standby controllers. The system also spawns new controllers, so it's self-healing, and all the drives are RAID protected so that even the loss of all the drives on the left will not cause any loss of access to data. So the system is not only beautifully multi-tenanted, but also it's resilient and self-healing, and will handle any failure either at the component level or even at the node level.
Nice. It is nice to hear about all these capabilities. I realize if you're an attendee and this is the first time you're learning about this, that's a lot to take in. And so you may have questions at the end. We'll look forward to getting to those. I'm trying to be mindful of the time. We're 19 minutes in now. And so what I'd like to do is move to the next slide. The good news is some of what Noam was just talking about will be covered on some slides that we have coming up here in a minute. So you'll get a chance to learn a little bit more about some of these things. Here's a good example. We want to make sure that we highlight those features that we know our customers ask for. This is a big deal. You heard it from Noam. You heard also from Scott about how people are expecting to use their cloud-based storage in a way that's more in line with how they're used to doing things in a data center. And of course, this is therefore fundamental to what we do. You can see all of the different interfaces and all of the different protocols. So let's take a minute here. This is an important slide, and so I'd like to make sure we take a moment here to point out what Scott, you were talking about earlier. When we combine the 2 solutions, you can see that what we have really is the best of both. We're both all about flexibility, right? We're both very much about working across distributed teams, and security is absolutely paramount. Scott, what's I know I've been doing a lot of talking here, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder. This is important for me to listen and you to talk. So please jump in.
Right. Just wanted to make sure you were through. I appreciate that. So yeah, what's great is that we are aligned, we being Zadara and LucidLink, in the way that we've formed our companies and the basis for what we're trying to accomplish. And so, flexibility, performance, and security, as well as cost, are the four things that we look at in the features and functionality that we bring to the customers through our services. And so when you talk about flexibility, for example, you're talking about the fact that users and applications can really access the data from any system. So you can have Windows users, Mac users, Linux users, all with a local mount point that accesses the data directly from the remote object store. And so that's important because let's take an example like CAD CAM. There's lots of companies out there that are doing all their design and CAD CAM, whether it's Autodesk or SolidWorks, on premise, and they're storing it on premise and having to manage all of that CapEx cost and increased file storage needs and all that. And they don't feel that they can put that data in the cloud because they'd have to refactor the applications to be able to access it, to make it accessible, and it would have to be downloaded before it can be worked on, and all of those problems that we talked about earlier with regard to latency and distance. But with the way that we've designed our unique file service, it really makes it so that those applications or users can access that flexibly from any system like we talked about, without the problems that are traditionally associated there. And so they can be in remote offices, they can even be in a single office, and it's got kind of a built-in DR functionality as well. Let's say that you're all working in a single office and suddenly there's a power outage. Well, in most cases, everybody goes home and takes the day off. But with LucidLink, everybody can take their laptops home and continue working. And so that the performance is there, the flexibility is there, and then the security is there. And just as Zadara has encryption at rest and in flight, we have encryption in rest and in flight. And furthermore, by separating out the metadata from the file data, we make it so that even if somebody were to steal your credentials and get access to your S3 bucket and get in there, all they'd see is a bunch of gobbledygook. It wouldn't mean anything to them because it's not like they're looking at the entire file as they would if it were not split the way that we do it with our proprietary protocols. So
exactly.
That's it in a nutshell.
It's what you hit on is really important, and I'm sure it's important to our users. And that is, I like to joke that nobody wakes up in the morning saying they want to buy more software, they want to buy more storage. They have a problem to solve. And you were just talking in very specific terms about some of the problems that we all encounter from time to time, whether it's having a power outage and what are you going to do? You mentioned the CAD CAM stuff. I love that example because we have in marketing very similar problems with large files. Anybody who's lived through that knows that these cloud-based systems are not ideal for many use cases. And in fact, with Zadara and with LucidLink, we've addressed those issues. I want to go through the next few slides a little quickly because we are getting up in time here. Secure encryption, we did talk about this. It's so important, we wanted to give it its own slide. You manage the keys. This is the important bit here. This is not about us managing the keys. The security extends all the way to the fact that we don't have a copy of those keys. We did mention a little bit, Noam, you mentioned it, I know, and Scott, you just mentioned it, a little bit about high availability and remote mirroring and backup. This is, and you can see here we have S3. This is important to keep in mind when you think about use cases and how you're using AWS today and how you might be able to tailor your use of AWS more completely or more tightly to your organization's needs using solutions like ours. keep in mind there's a full-featured solution is very likely to include AWS. This is not about taking them out of the equation. It's about thinking about how you're using AWS for what they're good for, and then using something like Zadara and LucidLink for what we're good for. I did mention at the top of our presentation that billing and account management is seamless. We are, in fact, in the marketplace. This is just a quick snapshot of one of our pages. We have a number of our what we call cubes, Zadara storage cubes up there on the marketplace. Please feel free to go check it out. I'd like to point out, Noam, why don't we take a minute here to talk about total cost of ownership? It might be a good place to at least mention at a high level some of what you might get in terms of being able to tailor our service to fit your needs and therefore perhaps bring your total cost of ownership down.
Yes, and a very good point, very important. Particularly with EFS, one sees what is essentially a one-size-fits-all solution. And when you have that, on the one hand, you gain simplicity because there aren't too many things to change. You can choose your capacity. But on the other hand, that deprives you of the ability to customize. And this is one of our differentiations, and it's consistent with our philosophy of giving you all the control and all the capabilities that you're potentially used to from the on-prem environment up here in the AWS cloud. So looking at EFS or comparing to EFS, comparing to the one-size-fits-all approach, with Zadara you can choose SSDs versus hard drives, or even a mix of SSDs and hard drives. You can choose the level of protection you want across those drives, so you can choose usable capacity versus cost and performance, and in many other capabilities that we alluded to over this webinar, with the end result being that you can choose the right balance for you between cost and performance and capabilities and durability and reliability, and customize it so that you're in control of what you're getting and what you're spending for it. And yes, in many cases, especially if you're comparing the all SSD EFS to hard drive based solutions with SSD caches from us, there could be significant cost savings. We're talking about savings that could be upwards of 80%.
It's a big number, and I know some of that is, of course, contingent upon exactly what you're doing with it and what your data looks like and all that. But we know those are real world figures, Noam. We've seen them from our own customers. Let's take a look at. I know we're getting close to the 30 minutes, or in fact, we might be on it. I promised you we'd keep moving. I don't know that we've touched on this quite explicitly, as explicitly as you see it in the screen here. So let me just take a moment to tell our audience. At its core, Zadara is a services company. This is what we do. We have industry standard hardware, and we have our own proprietary and patented software to help create the VPSA structure, the virtual private storage array structure that Noam was talking about earlier. But really, at our core, we are a services company, and we think that really matters. When you look at how we organize ourselves and how we choose to interact with our customers, what matters to us is that you think of your data as a service, and you think about getting access to that data in the same way that you might think about simply plugging an appliance into the wall and you know the electricity is going to come. That's why we can offer the industry's only, perhaps certainly the first, 100% uptime guarantee. And that's exactly what we mean by it, 100% uptime guarantee. If for any reason you're down, and it's very unlikely that you will be, because our track record over the last 8 years has been, and Noam, you know this figure better than I do, so please don't let me misquote it. It's 5 or 6 nines, I forget.
5.5. Yes, 5.5 nines.
Yes. And that's over 8 years. That's a track record we're very proud of, and it's why we can stand behind 100% uptime guarantee, because we're probably not going to have to invoke it. But listen, don't take our word for it. Here are at least some of the customers at Zadara, and we're very proud of the work we've done with them and with many others. If you want to learn a little bit more about some more customers, you can certainly visit our website and see some of their stories. We have case studies, and of course, you can see some more logos as well. Regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what your use case is, chances are we've already tackled it in one form or another. And like I said earlier, people don't get up in the morning saying they want to buy more software, more storage. They say they have a problem. We've encountered your problem. We've solved for your problem, and chances are we can address your problem in a manner that we've addressed it for another one of our customers. So that concludes the substantive portion of our presentation, and we're at 33 minutes. My apologies, that's a 10% overage, and I don't want to cut into our time for questions. I know we have a few questions. I've seen a few pop up here. So hopefully everybody enjoyed that. I appreciate everyone being on the line to listen to Noam and to Scott talk about what it is we can do to help supercharge AWS. And I'd now like to open it up to the group for questions. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the first one, and we can have, with our panel here, we can have answers on this call. And if we don't get to everybody's question, we will certainly follow up with answers, and we will email those out. So please do send your question. If we don't get to it here, we will answer it in email. Question here is, do you use NFS 4.1 or CIFS SMB 2.1? Question mark. Okay. Noam.
Yes, yes, and yes. So 4.1 for NFS and actually 2.2 for CIFS.
Very good. Very good. There's another question here, and this is, of course, one near and dear to our hearts. For on-premises, I know this is an AWS webinar, but an on-premises question came in. For on-premises, are you really shipping me gear? Am I leasing it? Is there a minimum? I'm trying to read this carefully here. I can start that answer. Noam, you might want to chime in here, please, because you know exactly how this works. This is a solution that's very much a service. The fact that the equipment comes to your premises is incidental. You're not leasing it. You don't take ownership of it. It's our equipment, and you pay us only for what you use. It's a different model, and we get this question a lot. A lot of people scratch their heads and say, run that by me again. If you have any other questions about it, we do encourage you to reach out, talk to us a little bit about your specific needs, and we can talk to you about how we tailor solutions and things like, for instance, shipping additional capacity beyond what you think you might need immediately, because we do some planning with you, right? Noam, you've experienced this. Somebody may say they need 100 terabytes, and we ship 200 to make sure that there's enough. So this is about partnering with Zadara to create a solution in the same way that you would create a solution for yourself, only now we take the risk, and risk is the name of the game here, people, right? You want to zero out your risk when it comes to storage if you can, and that's why we exist, because we believe that by taking the risk that we take, we can help you avoid the kind of risk you don't want to bother taking, because after all, it's not your core business. So please do reach out if you have questions about that. There's another question coming in here. Do you support EBS for relational databases? Noam, please.
To be honest, I don't fully understand the question, but I think I can answer it another way. We use, when we are in the AWS environment, we don't use EBS, and we don't use EFS, and we don't use S3. The storage, as you, the customer, consume it, is our infrastructure, and because it's our infrastructure, which is located within 1 or 2 milliseconds of your virtual machine, so it is local, is how we can provide this perfect multi-tenancy that I described earlier, and how we can provide better performance and better features than the native solutions. So with regard to EBS, we don't use EBS. We use our own systems. As far as relational database service, or RDS for short, the RDS can only use the internal storage that it is built to run on within AWS. So that we can't serve RDS. We definitely serve databases, and we do that as a matter of course. In fact, we support a cluster databases, which is pretty nifty. You can take your Microsoft SQL or your MySQL and run in clustered mode using our storage. But RDS specifically, we can't address because there's no way for third-party storage to talk to that.
Very good. We have another question. We have a Lucid Link question I want to get to in a minute because it's an interesting one, but there's a quick one here that I think we can answer quickly. It says, are you working with just AWS or other cloud providers? And if so, what are they? Noam, I can certainly answer this, but I'd like you to answer it because, of course, you run our cloud business.
We are certainly multi-cloud. To name a few, yes, AWS, also Microsoft Azure, also Google Cloud, and Oracle Cloud. And on top of that, in many cases, we're able to present the storage to multiples of these clouds at the same time. For example, you could take the same volume and have it be visible in the US East region for all 4 of these clouds at the same time, which is pretty nifty. And I don't know of any customer using all 4, but I do know of customers who use 2 clouds at the same time.
Yeah, it's a cool use case. The question here for Lucid Link, and I like this one, it's interesting. Can you use Lucid Link protocol for high performance applications, or do you need to use block for this? Scott, I will tee that up for you.
Thanks. Yeah, of course. We can absolutely use us for high performance applications. And in fact, you know, one of the reasons that our 2 companies decided to partner together is because we realized that in certain situations when you have enterprises or companies that are looking at trying to access large files over distance, you know, among a distributed team of folks, they typically need that. And so the way that we have designed our system and the fact that we're a distributed file service that's streaming the data, we are able to do it in a particular fashion, and we're able to do it just like local disk. So, you know, basically you consume it from the object store in exactly the same way you would consume it from local disk. And that means that oftentimes, you know, you may only need to pull down small blocks of data, make changes and upload those small blocks of data. And then we garbage collect out the old blocks. And so you always have the latest version of the file in the object store where it lives, but you're accessing it only blocks at a time in order to make the changes that you need to. And so that's a real paradigm shift from, you know, typical object storage where you have to download the entire file, make the changes, and then upload the entire file. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does, and I got to tell you, I listened to you talk about this, and I love it. It's such a slick system. It's so clever. Well done. We have another question. Do you have any limitations for IOPS by instance type while using your storage? Noam, I'm going to ask you, please, on that one to help out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. Because your application is running in an AWS instance, an EC2 instance, or a VMware Cloud and AWS instance, we support both. If that instance is too small for your application, then the bottleneck will be the instance. So it's important to correctly size your compute instance. And then on our side, there's very good news, which is you're able to size your VPSA based on your performance needs, your IOPS needs in this case, and you're able to upscale or downscale that non-disruptively. So you can find the right size and without being locked into any one size, because it can always go up or down. And there's very detailed reporting showing you how busy your VPSA is. So if you're at 80% utilization, maybe you should think about a bigger one. If you're at 20% utilization, you should probably downgrade to a cheaper one.
Yep. So that kind of management and flexibility is really central and core to our product. That's again, and I think you said this a minute ago, Scott. You kind of got to open your mind up, or it's a paradigm shift, right? Here we have another question, very down the middle, I think. Are your products FedRAMP certified? No, we'll start with Zadara.
It's a yes and no question, we ourselves don't have a FedRAMP certification, but we do provide these services that we described here to federal buyers, federal customers, through FedRAMP certified resellers, who are the ones who stand behind the products. So we have federal customers, including major federal organizations like the Department of Interior, and that's done thanks to our resellers who are certified.
Yep. So we very much have federal business and can handle it. Scott, I'm curious about LucidLink. If you have anything you want to add with regard to federal.
Same is true with us. We have, in fact, our first customer was a very large federal customer that most of us know very well. We can't speak about them publicly, but they did a lot of due diligence and also looked at us very heavily from a security perspective and vetted out the solution and decided that it was good enough for them. And it's even being run through the GovCloud portion of AWS. So that's an additional option out there for us as well. But yeah, our security has passed muster very well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned GovCloud because we work closely with all of our cloud partners, and GovCloud's important. There's one more question here. We're getting near the end of our time together, and this question is about price and whether or not, if I read it correctly, somebody wants to evaluate our pricing. My recommendation on that is that you reach out through our website, if you like, and talk to us a little bit about what you're trying to do. As Noam was saying, and Scott's been saying, these solutions that we offer are the kinds of solutions that you can tailor to your specific needs, and that's of course going to affect the price. But I think it's fair to say that in all cases, any high performance user that is currently using AWS and likes the features and functions we've been talking about is going to be very pleased with the kind of pricing that you can get using our services in lieu of, say, an EFS solution. So please do reach out. You can see on your screen right now, you can go to Zadara.com. LucidLink was kind enough to provide a link here for our joint solution. We really recommend you read it. It's very interesting. You can see that link down at the bottom of your screen. So for everyone who has attended today and has reached out and learned more, we hope you've enjoyed it. We hope this has been educational and helpful. Please do continue your journey. There's lots more to learn about this topic on our website and LucidLink's website. And of course, you can reach out to us anytime. I want to thank Noam Shendar and Scott Miller very much for your help today. It's been a pleasure having you two experts on with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, everybody. Once again, we appreciate your participation. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.